March 17, 1944, North Atlantic, 400 miles west of Ireland. Kapitän-Leutnant Werner Hartmann stood at the periscope of U-732, scanning the horizon for convoy targets. His Type 70 U-boat had been hunting for 6 days with no success. Allied convoy routing had become unpredictable, and patrol aircraft forced his boat to remain submerged during daylight hours. But Hartmann's hydrophone operator had detected propeller sounds suggesting a convoy was approaching. Hartmann ordered battle stations and prepared to attack. What he didn't know was that the convoy escort included HMS Swale, a river-class frigate equipped with a weapon system that had revolutionized anti-submarine warfare. The Hedgehog forward-throwing mortar could fire 24 projectiles in a circular pattern ahead of the attacking ship, while still maintaining sonar contact with the submarine. Unlike depth charges that exploded at preset depths, the Hedgehog projectiles only exploded on contact with the submarine. This meant that if the crew heard explosions, they knew they had hit their target. And for the U-boat crew, it meant they had approximately 90 seconds from the moment of detection to take evasive action before the Hedgehog pattern arrived. 90 seconds to decide whether to go deep, change course, or rig for silent running. 90 seconds that would determine whether they lived or died. The story of the Hedgehog mortar and the 90-second window it created reveals how technological innovation transformed the Battle of the Atlantic. The weapon represented a fundamental change in anti-submarine tactics, shifting from depth charge attacks that required passing over the submarine to forward-throwing weapons that allowed continuous sonar tracking during the attack. For U-boat crews, the Hedgehog represented a nightmare weapon that gave them minimal time to react and no warning of whether the attack had been successful until the projectiles either hit or missed. The psychological impact of knowing that silence meant the attack had failed, but any explosion meant certain death created terror that depth charges had never achieved. To understand why the Hedgehog was so effective, one must first comprehend the limitations of conventional depth charge attacks. Depth charges were large cylindrical explosives set to detonate at specific depths. An attacking ship would position itself over the submarine's last known location and drop depth charges in a pattern designed to bracket the target. But the system had critical flaws. The attacking ship lost sonar contact as it passed over the submarine. Depth charges took time to sink to detonation depth, during which the submarine could maneuver. The explosions created turbulence that disrupted sonar for minutes, allowing submarines to escape. By 1942, Allied navies estimated they needed to drop approximately 200 depth charges to sink one U-boat. This was inefficient and allowed many U-boats to escape damaged but operational. The Hedgehog changed this calculus fundamentally. Developed by the Royal Navy and introduced in 1941, the system consisted of 24 spigot mortars arranged in a rectangular frame on the ship's foredeck. Each mortar fired a 35-pound projectile containing 30 pounds of Torpex explosive. The projectiles were launched simultaneously in a ripple fire, creating an elliptical pattern approximately 200 feet ahead of the ship. The pattern covered an area roughly 120 feet by 140 feet, the approximate size of a U-boat. The projectiles had contact fuses that detonated only on impact with a solid object. This meant that missiles sank harmlessly to the ocean floor without exploding, while hits detonated against the submarine's hull with devastating effect. The genius of the Hedgehog was that it maintained sonar contact throughout the attack. The attacking ship fired the mortars while still approaching the target, with sonar tracking the submarine continuously. If the submarine maneuvered, the attacking ship could adjust course to follow. There was no blind period where the submarine could escape undetected. The attacking ship's crew would listen intently after firing. If they heard nothing, the attack had missed, and they could immediately prepare another salvo. If they heard explosions, they knew they had hit. The psychological certainty this provided to attackers and the terror it created in defenders cannot be overstated. For U-boat crews, the experience of being attacked by Hedgehog was distinctive and terrifying. Unlike depth charge attacks that announced themselves with massive explosions regardless of accuracy, Hedgehog attacks began with the sound of projectiles entering the water. Hydrophone operators would report multiple splashes, and then came the waiting. If the projectiles had been aimed incorrectly, they would sink past the submarine without exploding. The crew would hear them descending, metallic objects falling through water, and then silence as they hit the ocean floor far below. But if the aim had been accurate, the crew had no warning. The projectiles would strike the hull and detonate instantly. Survivors of near-miss Hedgehog attacks described the terror of hearing projectiles falling around their boat, knowing that any one of them making contact would mean instant death. The 90-second window from detection to impact was approximate and varied, based on submarine depth, attacking ship speed and sea conditions. But it represented the average time from when a submarine's hydrophone operator detected the sound of mortars firing to when the projectiles entered the water in the submarine's vicinity. During those 90 seconds, the U-boat commander had to make critical decisions with incomplete information. Going deeper might evade the attack, but would slow the boat and limit maneuverability. Turning sharply might move the boat out of the pattern, but would present the hull broadside to projectiles. Maintaining course and speed might carry the boat forward out of the pattern before projectiles arrived. But if the attacking ship had calculated correctly, it would carry the boat directly into the pattern. Every option carried risks, and the commander had 90 seconds to choose. Captain Lieutenant Hartmann faced this decision as HMS Swale's sonar acquired U-732. The frigate's commander, Lieutenant Commander James Morrison, had been hunting U-boats for 2 years and had achieved 3 confirmed kills with Hedgehog. When his sonar operator reported contact at 1,200 yards, Morrison ordered an approach at 15 knots. At 400 yards, Morrison reduced speed to improve sonar accuracy. At 300 yards, he ordered the Hedgehog prepared. The mortar crew checked firing circuits, confirmed the ready status of all 24 mortars, and reported ready to fire. At 180 yards, Morrison ordered fire. The Hedgehog mortars fired with sharp cracks, launching their projectiles in rapid sequence. The pattern arced ahead of the ship, 24 projectiles tracing ballistic paths that would bring them down in an ellipse centered on the sonar contact's predicted position. Then the projectiles hit the water with distinctive splashes. Morrison's crew fell silent, listening. The sonar continued tracking the submarine, which appeared to be turning to port. Morrison adjusted course to follow. Aboard U-732, Hartmann heard his hydrophone operators report. Multiple objects entering water. Close, very close. Hartmann ordered hard to starboard and increased speed to flank. The boat heeled as the rudder bit, and the electric motors whined as they spooled up to maximum power. But Type 7 U-boats were not fast underwater. Maximum submerged speed was perhaps 7 knots. The turn would carry the boat perhaps 50 feet to starboard in the time available. Would it be enough? Would it? The projectiles fell through the darkness, sinking steadily. Their contact fuses were armed, ready to detonate on impact. Hartmann counted seconds in his head. 60, 50, 40. The boat was turning, but was it fast enough? 30, 20, 10, 5, and then the projectiles reached 150 feet depth. 3 projectiles struck U-732 simultaneously. One hit the conning tower, one struck the pressure hull amidships, and one impacted the stern near the propellers. The detonations were instantaneous and catastrophic. Water flooded in under tremendous pressure. The lights went out instantly. Men screamed in the darkness. Within 2 minutes, U-732 settled onto the ocean floor at 600 feet depth, far beyond her crush depth. the hull collapsed completely, killing any crew who had survived the initial explosions. 44 men died. Aboard HMS Swale, the crew heard 3 distinct explosions. Morrison felt grim satisfaction. Hit. Confirmed kill. The sonar lost contact immediately as the submarine broke apart. Morrison ordered the ship to resume convoy escort station. The attack had taken less than 10 minutes from initial contact to confirmed kill. The Hedgehog had performed exactly as designed. The effectiveness of the Hedgehog compared to conventional depth charges was dramatic. Statistics showed that Hedgehog attacks achieved kills in approximately 25% of attacks where the weapon was fired, compared to less than 5% for depth charge attacks. The 4-fold increase meant that one ship with Hedgehog could achieve what 4 ships with depth charges could accomplish. In a campaign where escort vessels were desperately needed and chronically scarce, this multiplication of effectiveness was strategically decisive. The reasons for this improvement were multiple. Continuous sonar contact meant that submarine evasive maneuvers could be tracked and countered. Contact fuses that exploded only on hits meant that attacking ships knew immediately whether to continue the attack. The forward-throwing design meant that attacking ships approached the target head-on, reducing vulnerability to torpedo counterattacks. Every aspect of the system had been designed to address specific weaknesses of depth charges. For U-boat commanders, the tactical problem posed by Hedgehog had no good solution. The weapon could be deployed while the attacking ship was still outside torpedo range. The projectile's ballistic trajectory meant they could not be evaded by sudden depth changes. The pattern size was large enough that minor course changes were insufficient to escape. The constant harassment by multiple escort ships meant that U-boats rarely had the opportunity for the kind of radical evasion that might succeed. The psychological effect of Hedgehog on U-boat morale was significant. The silence when attacks missed was actually worse than depth charge explosions, because it meant the attack might resume at any moment. By 1944, U-boat morale was declining sharply, and weapons like Hedgehog contributed to this decline. U-boat crews already faced extraordinary dangers from depth charges, aircraft bombs, torpedoes, and mines. Adding Hedgehog to the list increased the sense that survival was increasingly unlikely. The production and deployment of Hedgehog systems accelerated through 1943 and 1944 as Allied navies recognized its effectiveness. British shipyards installed the system on frigates, corvettes, and destroyers. The U.S. Navy adopted the weapon and installed it on destroyer escorts. By 1944, hundreds of Allied escort vessels carried Hedgehog, making it the standard anti-submarine weapon of the Atlantic campaign. The weapon's reliability meant that even hastily trained crews could employ it effectively. The 90-second window that U-boats had to evade Hedgehog attack represents the broader dynamic of the Battle of the Atlantic. The campaign was a contest of technological innovation, tactical adaptation, and industrial production. When Germany held advantages in submarine design, they achieved successes. When the Allies developed counters like radar, Hedgehog, and improved sonar, U-boat losses mounted. By 1944, the cumulative effect of Allied innovations had shifted the balance decisively. The Hedgehog gave U-boat crews 90 seconds to evade death, 90 seconds that were rarely enough. The weapon killed U-boats efficiently, but perhaps more importantly, it killed morale and hope. The 90 seconds before the mortars rained down were not enough time to evade, not enough time to pray, barely enough time to realize that death was coming. And then the projectiles struck, or they didn't, and the attack continued until eventually they did. The Allies had more ships, more weapons, better technology, and improving tactics. The 90-second window closed, the Hedgehogs fell, and another U-boat died.